Okay, I'm just gonna do an overview of this book by H.W.L. Poonjaji or Poonja, and it might be hard to hear me because there's a fan going on the computer, but I have the volume turned up, so let me check to see. I think if I switch the sound to OBD, hold on a second here. Sound. It's not giving me OBD. Okay, so we'll just go with what we're doing here. I just wanted to point out this fascinating metaphor that Poonjaji uses, and I've mentioned this before. H.W.L. Poonja, he was the main lineage of Ramana Maharshi, who's the most famous modern Advaita Vedanta guru of India of the 20th century. And Poonjaji, he lived until I think it was 1997. So I had friends who had siblings that studied with Poonjaji, actually a sister of a friend of mine. And so that's how I learned about Poonjaji and Ramana Maharshi. And so my point is that you can understand non-dualism better by understanding it as non-commutativity, and that's what this video is about. So Poonjaji, he gives a talk online where he says, let this I face the source, and by I he means your sense of I, and by source he means the self. And facing the source is called inquiry or vichara. And when the I is facing, there is the inquiry. As mirror in front of the mirror is reflecting. When you see the mirror, see your face a reflection. When you keep aside the mirror, where does the reflection go? Back to the face. So this I is inquiring from its own source, which was a reflection in the mind. So that explanation is a little bit confusing, but I was reading this other book, and he uses the same metaphor and explains it a little bit better. So I'm going to go into that right now. If I can find the mouse. Here we go. And again, this is from the book The Truth Is, and I just got it on archive.org. And I cut out the excerpts. So he says, turn your face inward towards the source of I. Then the reflection of self falls on the mind, turned towards self, dissolving this mind into self, turned toward the unmanifest, towards self and peace. So basically, as Ramana Maharshi explains it, what we experience as the external world and our own mind they're both just reflections of the self. And so we can think of our own mind as a mirror of the self. And so that's why he says, as a mirror in front of you is reflecting, when you see the mirror, you see a face, a reflection. So your own mind is actually a reflection of the self. So when you put the mirror aside, or when you put your mind aside, where does the reflection go? It goes back to the self, or in the case of a mirror, it goes back to your face. So this I, the source, the sense of your I, the source of the I thought, is inquiring from its own self, the actual real source, which is a reflection in the mind. Okay, so when we reflect our mind back around to the self, then since the mind is just a reflection of the self, therefore the mind dissolves back into the self. But then he says, turn toward the unmanifest. Now the problem with Westerners is they want to cling to the self as being light. And Ramana Maharshi, he mentions this problem. He says people want to see, like you hear the phrase enlightenment, the term enlightenment. And Ramana Maharshi says people want to consider the self to be light, but it's not light. So Poonjaji is using this metaphor of the mirror, which is based on light. So you have light involved, but then he says turn toward the unmanifest. So what does that mean? That's actually a hint towards the non-commutativity involved. And if we keep on reading, we can discover this. So he's saying that the mind is only thought. So look at the thought. Who looks at the thought is the I thought. So you must perform surgery on the I. So then he says that this is a man who is listening, though most people don't listen. So sit quiet. And you have to give rise to the question, who am I? And you listen to that. And so now he's saying that the real key is listening. Whereas before he was talking about turning the mirror around, the reflection around. So then he says, where does the I rise from? Look towards the place where the I rises from, the sense of I. Merge into that place where the I arises and disappears. And then he says, enlightenment is not possible until the mind is destroyed. So the mind is again this reflection as light of the self. So you have to turn the mind around back to its source that's reflecting out as the mind. And then he says, proceed quietly and slowly, so quietly that even thinking is making too much noise. So again, he's relying on listening to silence as the secret of turning this reflection around as the source of the I thought. In other words, the source of the light is actually from this quiet listening process. So don't think and keep quiet and tell me if you do not see. In other words, the listening process then creates the light. That silence cannot be experienced, and so you are not that which I speak about. Simply keep quiet and see that nothing arises from any quarter to disturb your silence. So again, you have this eternal listening process in silence that cannot be experienced because it's silence listening to itself. This is what I speak about beyond the witness. So it's beyond any kind of light as a witness. It's silence alone. So you turn your face beyond the witness. So here he's using the turn your face again as this mirror metaphor. And you go beyond the witness, and beyond the witness is the silence alone. So beyond turning the light around as the reflection of the mirror is silence as listening. So then he says, first let us see where it is rising from. To find this, you are not to think, mind you, just to see. So when you turn the light around as a reflection, it's just visualization without thinking, but at the same time, you're listening to the source of the light. So then he says, reject this light and the space. So in other words, beyond the witness is this silence as listening. And then he says, just simply keep quiet. Keep quiet and make no effort. So when you're face to face with the self, only keep quiet. This quietness is no mentation, not even stirring the I thought. This quietness is the peace. This quietness is the eternal abode. So that listening process is beyond even the witness as light. Ask who am I and listen. Don't think about it. Simply ask once and don't think about it. Don't make any effort to find the answer. Even the thought of meditation is a thought, and therefore I do not suggest what most people call meditation. Just keep quiet by looking at the thought, and the thought will disappear, and what remains will be the silence. So this is the essence of the noncommutative process, is that you have this transference from looking to listening. And so you look at a reflection of a thought that disappears, and what remains will be something you listen to but don't see. Silence is most important for you, and this is the meditation that I speak of. So that's the essence of his teaching. You can keep silent when you are doing your activities by just looking at the thoughts that arise and knowing that these thoughts belong to the past. Mind itself is the past. It is a thought. It is time. So by time he means like linear past. And so when you look at the thought, time is gone, past is gone, mind is gone. The no mind state is a state of quietness. So you're just listening. So you stay here. And if you stay here, you're always quiet during your activities. So there's a secret to this listening process that's beyond even the light, whereas Westerners are very visual oriented, and so they're fixated on enlightenment and the light. But he's saying that quietness is the eternal abode, and that and it's a process of listening to silence. So I just wanted to get that point across, that beyond this metaphor of the mirror of the mind as a mirror of light, that you turn the light around, you have this process of listening to no thoughts. And so at first you have light with no thought, but then you listen, you reject even this light and the space, and you just listen to the source of the light. And that's all I really wanted to say.